All right, so you know how we always talk about the archetypes and the law of one? Well, today we are taking it a step further. We're going to explore what it actually means to live these archetypes, to go beyond just understanding them in our heads and actually embody them in our lives.
Yes, exactly. That's a crucial distinction that Ra emphasizes. They're not just concepts to be studied, but energies to be experienced. These archetypes, as Ra puts it, are energetic doorways for transformation. We're meant to actually walk through these doorways, not just admire them from a distance.
Right, exactly. And, Ra makes it clear that this is not exactly beginner level stuff. They
Yeah.
say the clothing of oneself within the archetype is an advanced practice of the adept, which has long studied this archetypical system. So we're talking about really embodying these energies, not just recognizing them intellectually, right?
Absolutely. And to really grasp this idea of embodiment, we need to understand how Ra describes archetypes as what they call concept complexes. It's like, you can't just look at the isolated pieces of an archetype and expect to understand the whole thing. As Ra explains, each archetype has within it several root atoms of organizational being. Separately, the overall structure of the complex cannot be seen. Together, the concept complex is irrefragably one thing.
Okay, so it's like a melody. Like you can't just hear a single note and understand the feeling of the whole song. It's the combination of notes, the arrangement that creates the melody, right?
Exactly. It's the harmony of the whole. An archetype isn't just a list of traits. It's this complete living essence that we need to experience in its entirety.
Okay, so that makes sense. Now the question is, how do we actually move from thinking about these archetypes like, the fool, the magician, the high priestess, to actually becoming them? Like what happens when we actually enter a state of contemplation and embody these energies? How does that change our inner world and our experience of life?
Right, that's the big question.
Exactly. So let's start with the archetype of the Fool, which often represents new beginnings. Ra calls this archetype the choice, and even says it's the central archetype of third density.
And what's interesting is that Rod describes the fool as the seeker standing at the very edge of the journey, like on the precipice of experience. It's
Ooh.
that moment of pure potential before any choices have been made, where all paths are still open.
It makes you think about those moments in your own life when you're standing at a crossroads, right? Facing a big decision full of possibilities, but also maybe a little bit of uncertainty.
Yes.
The Fool embodies that moment of pure free will before experiences shaped us in any particular direction. Ra even speaks of spiritual innocence and a kind of hopeful naivete that's present in the Fool because the journey hasn't really begun yet.
Right, and this leads to a really important question. How do you, the listener, usually approach these cliff of choice moments? Do you embrace that sense of boundless possibility? Or does it make you a bit anxious? Ra's description of the fool encourages us to honor that freedom without letting fear hold us back.
Yeah, it's about taking that first step into the unknown with courage and trust, right? So when we talk about becoming the fool, it doesn't mean acting foolishly, but rather reconnecting with that spiritual innocence, that willingness to take risks, not recklessly, but with a deep trust that every journey, no matter how challenging, starts with that single brave step.
Exactly. And from that place of pure potential, we move to the archetype of the magician, which Ra calls the matrix of the mind.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know, right? And the name itself points to the idea that consciousness is really the foundation of everything in this density.
This is where things get really interesting, because Ra actually says the self-conscious entity is full of the magic of that which is to come. And that statement really highlights the incredible creative power that's inherent in our awareness. It suggests that our conscious mind isn't just a passive observer.
Yeah, it's an active participant
Right.
in creating reality.
Yeah.
And the magician, as Ra presents it, isn't about like, pulling rabbits out of hats. It represents conscious awareness itself. The waking mind that seeks to understand, to create, to manifest.
Right.
It's the part of us that shapes our experience of reality.
Yeah, so it's about more than just thinking. It's about using our focused will, our intention to actually bring things into being. It's the starting point, the power source for any spiritual work, for conscious growth and evolution.
Yeah, exactly. So I invite you, the listener, to consider this in your own contemplative practice. What does it feel like to embody the energy of the magician? What does it mean to trust your conscious awareness as the source of your spiritual power?
Okay, so becoming the magician, it's not about wielding some external force. It's about cultivating and directing the power of our own minds, our intentions. It's about recognizing that we have this innate creative potential within us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just as the magician represents that active conscious mind, Ra presents the high priestess as the potentiator of the mind, describing her as the deep unconscious.
There's such a sense of mystery in that description. Ra says, the unconscious is indeed what may be poetically described as high priestess, for it is the potentiator of the mind, and as potentiator, is that principle which potentiates all experience.
And what's so interesting is that the high priestess doesn't act in the same way as the magician. She holds the potential for all action waiting to be activated. She represents the vast reservoir of intuition, the source of all those insights and wisdom that can bubble up into our conscious mind.
And there's this powerful image that Ra uses, the high priestess standing between pillars of dark and light.
Yes.
It suggests that within our unconscious lies both positive and negative potential, and it's the conscious mind, the magician, that ultimately chooses which to draw upon and bring into manifestation.
Right, and accessing that unconscious wisdom, that high priestess within, isn't about forcing things. It requires stillness, introspection, and a willingness to listen to the subtle whispers of intuition and inner knowing.
Yeah.
It's about trusting that deeper current that flows beneath the surface of our thoughts.
So becoming the high priestess, it's not about trying to control the unconscious, but about surrendering to that mystery, finding wisdom in silence, in the spaces between our thoughts.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to Ra's central teaching. The clothing oneself within the archetype is an advanced practice of the adept to intensify, articulate, and heighten some aspect of the magical personality. The point is not just to understand these archetypes intellectually, but to integrate them into our being.
Yeah, it really shifts our whole perspective, doesn't it? Instead of analyzing these archetypes from afar, we're invited to step right into their energy, to feel what it's like to experience the world through the lens of, say, the fool's innocence, or the magician's focused will, or the high priestess's intuitive wisdom.
And Ra's description of these archetypes as molecular beings, as these conscious arrangements of energy, that gives us a really powerful way to understand this process of embodiment. It's like we're not just pondering abstract ideas, we're actually inviting these energetic patterns into our awareness, forming a sort of partnership for spiritual growth.
So it's like they are these fundamental blueprints of consciousness that are always present, and when we engage with them consciously, we allow them to really manifest and work through us, shaping our understanding and enriching our experience of reality.
Exactly. It's a shift from passively knowing about these energies to actively letting them transform us.
So for you, the listener, remember, the archetypes in the Law of One are not just something to study, but they are living, energetic doorways, as Rob puts it, offering a path to deep personal and spiritual transformation.
Yes. And as you go about your day, ask yourself, which of these archetypes, the fool with their open-hearted potential, the magician with their focused will, or the high priestess with her deep intuitive knowing, resonates most strongly with you right now?
And how would embodying that archetype, even in a short meditation or contemplation, shift your perspective on a situation or opportunity that you're facing? How might it influence your actions in the coming days?
I encourage you to explore this, to go beyond the mental understanding and into the direct lived experience of these potent archetypes. That's where the real magic lies.
The real magic.